Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Very pleased to have James and Neil from the Trust on with us. The whole show tonight will be regarding the county grant purchase. I will say that we won't be touching on anything regarding the managerial situation at the club, mainly because none of us know anything. At the moment, until an announcement is made, then there's really nothing to be said. So I hope you are okay with that. If by any chance there is an announcement that comes out while we're on air, we will certainly go over to it and we can talk about it then. But tonight we really want to concentrate on the county ground purchase issues with the guys from the Trust. A couple of other things. You may have seen on social media that we have a ticket competition running for Saturday. There's a question regarding Charlie. So if you can answer that, and we will do a automatic generation for a winner on Thursday and contact you to let you know. Okay, to let the winner know. Also, you may well have seen that this is Tom Broadbent Lounge are organising a GoFundMe for Stephen Darby's shirt. Hannah's has very kindly secured the purchase of the shirt, and that is now, I believe, gone to Steph and Stephen. And so the GoFundMe is to get the cost of that, plus anything over and above will be donated to the motor neuron disease charity. So please donate if you can. Very worthwhile charity, as we know, very close to our hearts, given with Stephen. And so that's on social media, on Twitter, if you could want to have a look at that and read what that's all about. Also, we've lost a red squirrel. You probably know the old Duffers, not the red Duffers, the old Duffers. They had a red squirrel mascot, very much like Sid here, but red and white. So it's been lost at not the last home game. Last home game, sorry. So if anybody has picked it up or has seen it, please can they get in contact with the old Duffers, who would be very keen to get it back. Okay, so that's everything for now. Let's bring Vic on. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Chris. Hi. Yeah, very sad news about the red squirrel.
Yes.
Yes, I think he's a friend to many of us. So as soon as we get him back, the better. I should say that SAS Travel have a few spaces left for Walsall, which is a week on Saturday, of course. So they're open tomorrow on phone bookings only. On the details are on there on our website, and indeed on theirs too. So if you want to book to go to Walsall a week on Saturday, then that would be the way to do it. And they've got a few spaces left. So there we are.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we've had a lot of questions already coming through, and hello to everybody who's done some welcome messages on there. So let's get straight on, and we will bring on James and Neil. Hi, guys.
Good evening.
Hi,
okay. Right then, so I'm going to leave you. Please put any questions into the comments. We'll get through as many as we can. If there aren't any that the James or Neil can't answer, we will certainly make a note of it, and I'm sure they will take that back and come back to whoever's asked it. Okay, so I will speak to you soon.
Thanks, Chris. And as Chris said, if any news comes through in the next hour or so, we will, of course, let you know. Welcome, Neil. Welcome, James. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I think it's worth just outlining your posts with the Trust. Neil, if you can give us an idea who you are and what you do with the Trust.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Neil Hutchings. I'm a relatively new member of the Trust. I joined back in March of 2022. So I've been with the Trust now for about 10 months. Lifelong Swindon Town fan from the age of 8. I've had a season ticket probably nearly all those years now. And in a professional capacity, I spend a lot of time negotiating contracts, commercial management, kind of legal stuff. I'm not a lawyer by trade, but I spend most of my time preparing, administering and putting contracts together. So I was pleased to join the Trust and lend that skill set to what's been a really interesting last few months in pulling the county ground deal together as part of a much wider group. It's although you've got James and I today, there's been a large group of people with a couple of professional lawyers spending a lot of their personal time on this. So it's been a great team effort.
James, you're a regular on the panel, of course, but just a reminder, so where you sit with the trust.
Yes, so I've been with the trust for about 8 years, I think now. So I've been living and breathing all of the county ground purchase stuff with Steve and Alex and a few other board members for that time. But I'm the one of the co-vice chairs with Alex, working with everyone on the board. Yeah, so all exciting times we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, obviously all the questions are coming in, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. But I think, Neil, it's worth going over the background to this, because obviously for many years people have looked at the county ground and thought, if only we owned our own ground. Well, what is the background to trying to own our own ground?
Yeah, sure. I think the story goes back over the last 7 years. I think that was the first time the concept or the idea of the supporters trying to either buy the county ground or a part of it was first raised. One of the challenges of football is investing a lot of money into the infrastructure you have around you. And if you don't own the ground, it's very difficult to do that. And of course, we've had some interesting characters own the club over the years. All of them have looked at it. But if you don't own it, if you lease the county ground in the way that the club currently does from Swindon Borough Council, you're not going to plough millions of pounds into it if ultimately you don't own it. So the idea was to buy the county ground from Swindon Borough Council. It's been looked at as the supporters trying to buy it on their own. And then under the previous owner, it was suggested that a 50-50 joint venture might be more appropriate. And that's where that idea was born. A lot of water has gone under the bridge with people coming and going, but the concept remains the same. So one of the two key priorities, I guess, come back to, from a supporter's point of view, getting the county ground into a safe pair of hands. Although the council are a safe pair of hands, who's to say that they would sell it off to somebody in the future that we may not have a strong relationship with as supporters, or may not have the long-term interests of the club at heart. And there's plenty of stories going around, and our friends up the road in Oxford being an example where an ex-chairman owns the ground, who's no longer involved with the day-to-day running of the club. So it kind of puts out the handcuffs on what you can do with the stadium. So from the supporters' point of view, it made sense for us to try and get control over the county ground. And from the club's point of view as well, if you've got stability and you know that you own the ground, or you're sharing the ownership of the ground, you create an environment where you can then start investing serious money into it. I mean, we all know the county ground is creaking. It's got lots of character, but there's a lot of work that needs doing. And that work hasn't happened because nobody's really had control over it. And hopefully the purchase that we're talking about and the trust members are voting on this week should complete by the end of January. And then the hard work really does start.
Yeah, a question's coming in about the vote already. This from Phil James, and it says, why was the vote with the trust members held so close to proposed completion of the deal? Seemed a bit late to consult members. So, A, why just the trust members? B, why now?
Yeah, it's a very, very valid question, and I've seen it posted on social media a few times. So ultimately, the negotiation of the purchase of the county ground has been essentially historically between, as Neil mentioned, the trust specifically, and obviously, the club, and a 50-50 deal. So ultimately, because those two parties are the two parties that are going into the 50-50 deal, ultimately, we've got to naturally, as a society, part of our rule says that on any of these kind of things that we need to go out to our membership, of which that's about 1,100 paid members at the moment. We have more members than that, but we have free members, society members, lifetime members. But ultimately, we need to go out to our paid members, people that are paying monthly, and actually ask them for permission to change some of our kind of minor rules in order to allow us to then purchase the county ground basically from Swindon Borough Council, as has already been said, in a 50-50 deal with the club. So it's really just making sure that we're following the right process in order to make sure we get the right permissions in order to purchase the ground in that kind of arrangement. So that's why it's with the trust only, because the negotiation and the deal is with the club and the trust. And that's why we've had to go out to our members and ask that question.
So let's get negative about this, Neil, for a minute. Say the vote went against, what would happen then?
Well, I guess it's a possibility, Vic. We've been encouraged with the early action that we've seen. The vote went live on Sunday morning. If it really did go against us and the vote was no, then we would have to take stock in terms of what we did next and how we went about that. Because there's many ways we can structure this deal. But given the history of Swindon Town and the characters that have owned the club and some of the pain that we've gone through, we've got our fingers crossed that we're going to have some good support from the members to back this purchase. And
you've got until Saturday, I think, isn't it? Saturday night to get your vote in?
Yeah, that's right. 10 o'clock on Saturday night is the cut-off. And we'll be following up with members who haven't voted later in the week just to make sure they've not lost their email or it's stuck in their spam folders. But if you sat next to a member at the game on Saturday, ask them if they voted. Every vote does count.
I've got a question here from Darren, but it's also been answered. So Darren says, how do I join the trust? And Alex from the trust says, whilst the joint venture vote is ongoing, we've paused membership for the time being, but we'll open this option up once the vote is complete. I guess that, James, is to allow those who are currently members to get their votes in before new members come in. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's been a common question that's been asked of us over certainly the last few days. We took the decision to suspend the kind of previous membership joining element on our new website that went live last week. For that reason and that reason only, really, we needed to make sure we asked current members, paid members, to ultimately vote. And it would have certainly caused some logistical issues and what have you had we kind of kept the membership open. But ultimately, as Alex has said, and thanks Alex for helping us out on the chat there. Ultimately, we will reopen that membership piece imminently in the next few weeks as we kind of get towards talking to fans and going out there ultimately to allow them to kind of be part of the whole process of the ownership and being able to purchase a part of the county ground ultimately.
You'll be aware that lots of questions are coming in, so let's get through them as quickly as possible. David says, when the deal is completed, what's the actual cost of the deal at the end of the day? And Neil, can we talk about finance? Because Nigel Eady, of course, great town fan, a magnificent man, went to all the town games. Many people remember that very long scarf, which I think is in Foundation Park now. I think that's the money that's helping to fund this. But what about the actual cost of it? Are you able to put a cost on this?
Yeah, sure. So the actual purchase of the county ground is £2.3 million. That's a valuation that's been agreed between ourselves, the club, and Swindon Borough Council. It's important for the council to demonstrate good value. They just can't give it away. So that's a market valuation that's been worked up over the last few months. In addition to that there's stamp duty, which adds another 100,000. So overall, the actual cost of buying the stadium is 2.4 million. And as you say, Vic, the trustees of the Nigel Eady Trust, it's a fantastic gesture. They've come forward and they're going to pay the full amount, the full £2.4 million, which is the total sum. It's not 50%, it's the whole amount, is coming from the Nigel Eady Trust. And it's not a loan. It doesn't have to be paid back. In his will, Nigel wanted the value of his will and the value of his trust to be put to local sporting use, and particularly Swindon Town was very close to his heart. And we honour his memory, and we certainly thank his trustees for some fantastic support.
Yeah, absolutely. We should say, of course, that Swindon Borough Council are duty bound to charge the market value, because at the end of the day, they represent the council taxpayers of Swindon Borough. So that's the whole point, isn't it? They can't just give it away, James, can't they? They can't just say, here you are, have this ground.
No, and, obviously this process has been going on for, as we've mentioned already, 7 or 8 years. And, when we originally talked about buying the county ground, obviously there was a market value then at that point. But obviously, we've had to go through the process over the last kind of 18 months of having the county ground revalued. And so we are paying effectively current market rate, not market rate from when we effectively started negotiating kind of 7 or 8 years ago.
Right, let's get some more of these questions. Rob says, will the trust be charging the club rent on the ground for their share? Will it be 50-50 on ground development or down to Clem? Now, rent is mentioned, Neil. Can you explain how this works, please?
Yeah, sure. So under the current lease with Swindon Borough Council, the club pay a market value rent every year for using the stadium. After the purchase is completed, which hopefully will be in the coming weeks, a new lease will be entered into between the joint venture, which is 50-50 owned between the trust and the club itself. And what we've agreed with the club is that we're going to discount that rent by 50%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that all of the money that the club paid to the JV as landlord is going to get reinvested back into the stadium anyway. So the 100% minus kind of cost for auditors and stuff like that, but 100% of the cost that the club paid to the JV in rent will get invested back into repairs and dilapidations of the stadium. Now, clearly, where we're talking about some longer term big developments, the Stratton Bank being one example, are we going to spend that money on the toilets on the Stratton Bank if we're then going to actually refurbish the Stratton Bank as part of a major development? No, we're not. So we're going to have to target which areas of the stadium we put that money towards as we go. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the business plan in a moment.
Okay, well, you mentioned the Stratton Bank. Well, just before you say that, Andrew Perkins says, will the Stratton Bank be totally rebuilt or just having the roof put on? Well, there are also restrictions with the roof, of course, as we know, with the light of the houses behind it. So do you want to mention that now, or do you want to get onto that later?
Just park that for a moment. It's an important point, but just park that for a moment. I think the other reason for the 50% discount is that it frees up more cash for the club to spend on other uses, hopefully the playing budget. So it's a win-win. So that the club are still paying rent, that rent will go back into the club. They're paying a 50% deduction to the market rent. And I think just to pick up on the kind of the question that was asked, one of the reasons that the trust are doing this on behalf of all Swindon supporters is that the trust is a registered society under the Cooperative and Community Benefit Society Act. Now that sounds a really boring piece of legislation, but what it means is that we've got a binding asset lock as part of our rules, which means that by owning 50% of the stadium, we can't sell that and give the money to our members. We can't pay out dividends, we can't pay out interest. The trust has a responsibility to ensure that the stadium ownership and the assets that go with it are used for the benefit of the supporters and the membership of the different supporter groups and the wider community. So that's why the trust are at the centre of all this and not the official supporters club, for example. It's a legal reason. And the other reason that's important is that means 100% of the money that goes through the JV has to go back into the club, has to go back into the county ground. That's a very important point. This is going into the county ground, not into the day-to-day running of the club. Okay.
Yeah, you've seen the hashtag CGJV, County Ground Joint Venture, just to explain what that is. Right, let's have a look. Again, the Stratton Bank Mark says, will the club have enough money to pay the elite cleansing team to tackle the lose at the Stratton Bank? Well, you've already touched on that. I mean, yes, interesting. Right, and also Matthew says, when will it be completed, James? Well, I think 31st of January is your target. Is that right? And also, will it be called, surely at least it needs to be a stand named after Nigel. And Steve Tyrrell says, why not Nigel Eady County Ground? So I'm sure you will recognise his name in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, so to take the first point, the deposit will be paid by the end of this month, as Neil's already said. And then we've effectively got 6 months then to pay the kind of balance. That doesn't mean it'll necessarily take 6 months. It could be done a lot sooner than that, but that's kind of like the maximum period to pay that balance effectively. And to take the second point, I think there are talks going on at the moment as to how we can honour Nigel Eady. Whether it be naming the stadium, whether it be naming the Stratton Bank. There's lots of things that they're looking at the moment. So I don't think it's necessarily been decided what the actual end acknowledgement piece is, but certainly there's lots of talk about what it, actually doing that. So which I think is brilliant because it's a huge, massive gesture, and without without that money from his estate, it would have been a lot more difficult in order for us to have purchased our own ground. So I think we should definitely recognise that in a massive way, really.
Yeah, absolutely. This from Malcolm. Surely this project is going to take decades to come to fruition if progress to date is any yardstick. The planning consents and legal hoops will take years. Do you want to take that, Neil?
Yeah, they will. There's no denying that. I mean, we're not talking about the kind of the ongoing putting on of the sticking plaster to get by, which has been what's happened to the county ground over so many years. We're finally going to be able to do this properly, and yet that's going to require architects and designs and drawings and planning applications, consultation. Those are all the things that we're going to have to do. But the thing that stopped it up to this point has been the ownership of the stadium, and fingers crossed, at the end of January, we could well be on our way to putting that to bed once and for all. Yeah,
and I think just on the back of that as well, I think the reason why we're 7 years down the line is because naturally we've gone through some huge changes over that period in terms of ownership of the club, COVID, which delayed everything. So yes, it's taken that period of time, but there's been a couple of good reasons why that's taken that amount of time. So yes, as Neil said, although we will have to go through the planning permission stages and such like, at least we will actually at that point then own the ground and actually be in control of our own destiny a lot more than certainly we have been over the last few years.
Yeah, Peter says someone must make sure that Nigel Eady is suitably acknowledged and remembered after this deal goes through, which is something you've touched on already. What is the rough timescale, says Stephen, after purchasing the county ground that redevelopment will begin at the stadium? Have you got any idea about that, Neil?
Yeah, so it's actually written in the contract with the council that we need to commence development. And so that means actually signing contracts and getting planning permission and actually ready to start doing things within 3 years at the absolute maximum. If we don't, the council have the right to buy the stadium back from us. A condition of us doing this is that we're actually going to develop it. We're not just going to sit on it as it is. And if we do just sit on it, the council can buy it back again. So it's in our interest to get going as soon as we can. We have to undertake at least £1 million worth of development within those 3 years. So that could be the roof on the Stratton Bank. It could be filling in one of the corners. It could be anything. But the value of the development has to be sizable, and it has to be over £1 million. And we have to do that within 3 years, or at least we have to commence it within 3 years.
Okay, this is from Andrew. Clarification as to why we seem to have lost James for a moment. He might be off finding things off about. You never know. Oh, he's back again. Did you find anything out whilst you were away, James?
No, unfortunately, just my broadband router decided to have a funny 5 minutes. Okay. So apologies.
All right, fair enough. That's a shame. Yeah, anyway. Clarifications re why Nigel Eady money paying the whole of the ground purchase. Where does Clem come in, re-ownership then? So if it's a 50-50 partnership between the football club and the trust, but Nigel Eady Trust is paying the whole of the money, how does that work?
So I think it's fair to say that to get it over the line, the Nigel Eady money is really going to make a huge difference. Clem will, without a doubt, be making a contribution to the ongoing development of the stadium. And so whether Clem puts his money into buying the stadium or developing it, one way or the other, he'll be making his contribution. But it's also important, though, that we as supporters play our part. So we're not in a position where we have to raise 50% of the money. So for every £1 million that go into the stadium development, the supporters aren't going to have to put in 50% of that. But it is fair to say, though, that we want to play our part. That the more we raise and the more we contribute to the county ground, the more of a say that we're going to have over what happens to it. If we don't put a penny into the county ground, then understandably, Clem and future owners of the club, because this is a 250-year lease we're talking about. This is a multi-generation commercial deal we're talking about, not just for today and tomorrow, but we're talking for decades to come. So it's important that supporters play their part as well. And although it's not part of the discussion tonight, in the coming weeks and months after we complete the completion of the purchase, there's going to be a lot of work and a lot of discussions about how the supporters can play their part, both in terms of fundraising, having a say in what happens. It's going to be an exciting time. But if we don't buy the stadium, none of that matters. So right now, the focus is on the vote, getting us over the line with the purchase, and then we start talking about what we can do and how we're going to go about it.
Okay, but Clem will be putting his fair share in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. This is from Ian, and he says the question re the timing of the vote wasn't answered. Why the 11th hour? And Martin says, I agree. This wasn't answered. This could have been done weeks ago. Do you want to go through it again, James, briefly? Why now?
So I picked that one up.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
There's around 200 pages of legal contracts over a number of different documents, and we're on about verse 38 of most of them. For the last 4 months, we've been having weekly legal calls between ourselves, the club, and the lawyers that we've got supporting us. It's a complex deal. It's taken time. And only when we were happy that we were very close to getting it over the line and the final few things were falling into place, were we really ready to kind of bring it public again. Because there's been so many false starts on this that if we kind of come to the membership for a vote and then we still didn't do anything for 6 months, we'd have been asked why. So there's a lot of work gone into this, and it's all happened very quickly. So I appreciate it's all been a bit kind of 11th hour as far as supporters have been concerned, but it's all been done with their interests in mind, and we've only come to them when we're ready to get the deal done.
Okay, I'm trying to scroll through these. There's lots of questions coming in, and I'll read this one out because there's several on this subject. Carol says, is there any money in the overall pot to maybe buy affected houses on Shrivenham Road so that the development of the Stratton Bank won't be an issue? Club could then rent out or resell houses because, as you'll be aware, you can't build above a certain height on the Stratton Bank because of the light of the houses behind. So would that be a possible? I mean, you may remember years ago, the club used to own, I think, number 1 Shrivenham Road, where it was a club hostel. So, what would be the possibility of that, or is that something to look at in the future?
I think it would be a future one, to be honest. But I know that everyone's very, very aware of the restrictions, obviously, of the current Stratton Bank with those houses. So, it may well be something that certainly we can look at to see, if actually the benefit of actually owning those houses would be would add more benefit to actually what we could do on the Stratton Bank. So again, it would be something that would be looked at as part of the kind of ongoing business plan, really.
Yeah, you've got to get the people to sell them, of course, in the first place. They may not.
Yeah, exactly.
Sean says, I was told there was a blueprint already been done on the Stratton Bank. Is that true, or is it part of the? Because there were plans produced, weren't there? What a future county ground might look like, and I think the Stratton Bank was included. So you've got an idea what you want to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, for the whole ground, really. I mean, there's ideas, there's plans, but like Neil said a minute ago, we've been going like this for quite some time. So only really can you start properly planning and putting a business plan in place once you actually own that ground. So go on, Neil. I know you wanted to probably add something to that.
No, pretty much word for word what you said, James. I think the only thing I'd add is that to take it to the next step, you've got to then start doing kind of artists' representations and architect drawings. And all that costs money, and there was no value in doing that until we knew we had the kind of security over the ground.
Yeah, and we've had to, I think we've said a few times before, the trust and at our AGMs and through the advisory board as well. There's a lot of money that's been spent, getting to this point. The kind of, the evaluation, the reevaluation, looking at kind of surveys on dilapidation. We've spent a lot of money getting to this point, so there isn't endless amounts of money that we can spend. So we would only do that kind of exercise, as Neil said, once we own the ground and we can really do something with it.
Okay, John says, can you please clarify exactly what areas come under the definition of the ground? As I understand it, this includes the area outside the Stratton Bank. Can I use sort of terminology I used to use when I was in the valuation office? The curtilages of the ground, gentlemen, what are they?
Great word.
Question. So if you start in the northwest corner, it's the area of land that starts on the county ground, runs down the access road, the boundary of the cricket club. It includes the little car park between the county ground and Foundation Park. Then you come down the Stratton Bank. across the front edge of the green area behind the Swithenham Road, boundarying the Magic Roundabout. You follow the Magic Roundabout boundary over to the far corner back to County Road, and then back up again, including the car park, the access road by the County Ground Hotel, and then back up again. So it's the car park, the green space in front of Swithenham Road, all the way up to the cricket ground boundary to the north.
Goodness, that is quite a sizable. I mean, the green bit, the green bit in front of the Don Rogers. I mean, in the summer you could do quite a lot of that, couldn't you? In the
Yep.
Start and end of the season, not necessarily in the muddy months, obviously, that we're in at the minute, but there is a possibility to do lots of stuff with it. And the car park, I assume, James, will take a big part of this town end development when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's plans for, like I said, nothing's kind of set in stone as such, but the plans that we've got, the latest version of the plans, ultimately you'll see that we'll lose some of the car park through the town end development. I think they want to extend the shop, that kind of area there. Obviously, we talked about the museum as well, potentially being that kind of location. There's lots of other things that the club are looking at, cafes and various other things. So it's I think they've even looked at potentially, if they're going to diminish some of the car park space for that development, how could they make more car parking spaces? So they've even thought about maybe like a multi-story car park in there that could potentially house more cars in a smaller space.
Okay, Andy says, I'm a trust member, brackets, voted yes yesterday, close brackets. And one of the reasons I joined was to be involved in the purchase. Once the council are out of the way, will there be an opportunity for fans to contribute and own a bit of the county ground? Now, I know you don't want to get into this too much, but shares, £19.69. So when are you expecting the launch of shares, Neil? When's that going to happen?
Imminently. So the trust board have had lots of conversations about this. This is such a big deal in getting the purchase done and complete and getting the vote complete that if we tried to do everything in one go, there is a risk that we'd be drowning out the real reason why we're doing this, which is getting the purchase completed. So there's a lot of work been done on it. There's a lot of preparation that's been done on it. As soon as we know we've got the county ground under control and we've paid the deposit, or we've actually completed it as well, because there's a chance we could pay the deposit and the balance all in one go, fingers crossed. But as soon as we know we've got it and it's contractually done, then you'll start hearing a lot about how supporters can get involved and share in the ownership of the county ground.
Yeah, and I think it's to Neil's point, we'll do it as soon as we can. But I think we've got to get it right because we've only got one chance at getting this right, really. I think, that there's been a lot of things we've needed to get kind of like the infrastructure and things in place and prerequisites to actually enable us to do the kind of society kind of share purchase. Ultimately, one of those things has been a brand new website, which we launched last week. The previous websites, we had several, actually 3. So we amalgamated all 3 of those into one, trustfcfc.com, and ultimately that kind of encompasses all of the trust activities under one roof, if you like. And obviously a key part of that is essentially information for fans on the county ground. So you can look at all of the things that Neil and I have been talking about tonight. There's information on the website under the county ground menu on the joint venture and the financial side of things. People can go and look at that. But also, obviously, the share piece, there's got to be a mechanism for people to buy those. And so that's why we've suspended our membership at the moment. And then, as Neil said, once we're in a position to then launch and allow fans to ultimately purchase part of the county ground through that kind of society kind of share purchase, ultimately that will be driven on the website largely. And our previous websites really went up to that task. So we've had to relaunch the site to allow the functionality in order to support that. So again, that's the reason why we've had to have that done. And that went live last week. So we're now ready. We've got the platform in preparation for the whole purchase and of those shares to happen.
Okay, well, imminently is what Neil said. So we'll keep an eye out for that in the not too distant future. Loads of it coming in. So do bear with me when I scroll down here. Michael says, do trust members get a vote on future redevelopment? So say, for instance, you came up with a plan to develop, I don't know, the Arkle stand. Would people get a chance to vote on that?
Yeah. So one of the core functions of the JV is to produce an annual business plan. And the annual business plan will set out the aims and aspirations for the coming 12 months, what key development is going to be undertaken, what repairs and dilapidations are going to be done, and where the money for that is going to come from. And so that'll be prepared in advance. And then under the JV agreement, which governs how all of this will work, that will then come to the trust as a shareholder, 50% shareholder, and we need to give that approval. And we will do that approval by going to the trust membership and asking them their view and to vote on the annual business plan. So all the key development decisions around kind of the Stratton Bank roof or boxes or the town end redevelopment, whatever it is, will form part of the business plan. And so that annual process is the formal method of us getting approval by taking it to the members. And of course, to feed into that, there'll be lots of collaboration. There'll be the advisory board. No doubt there'll be separate sessions to get supporters' view on what they see to be important. And it's not just about those big kind of one-off projects like the Stratton Bank, like the town end. It's also about how we use that wider curtilage, Vic, that you were just talking about. There's a lot of land there. There's two important things moving forward. One clearly is about the supporters, but the second is about the club developing a sustainable model. We've got to find ways of supporting the club in driving revenue 7 days a week, not just at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, because that feeds through into the playing budget and the success that we should have on the pitch. So all of the development of the ground isn't just about comfort for us sat there on a Saturday afternoon. It's about trying to get community involvement, use the stadium for more things, community space, but more revenue streams as well that build that sustainable model.
Yeah, we should say, of course, what matters to one supporter doesn't necessarily matter to another supporter. And sometimes it's the little things that matter more than the big things, don't they? I mean, whether you get a good cup of tea or not, it matters to some people, and quite rightly so, things like that. So there are all sorts of things to do into this. Right, Claire says, I'm going to read these out as they come in because there are piles of them. Are there any clauses or plans being submitted to redevelop the ground to the council already? As you mentioned, if the money isn't spent on this project in a certain time frame, the council will claim it back. Not that I'm saying the council are devious. Well, we're not, by the way, but they could block all plans. And there's another one which says about the debt owed to the council at the moment. Is that taken into account in the purchase price? James, you want to take that?
The first bit I might ask Neil to comment on, but I can comment on the latter bit. So, ultimately, you will notice through the advisory board minutes every month, which I largely attend at the moment with Alex, ultimately, the debt's been going down, but probably a lot slower over the last few months. One of the reasons for that is ultimately that there is some money left with the Swindon Borough Council that's owed in back rent. That essentially will be cleared and has to be cleared as part of the county ground purchase. So that will disappear, and obviously in subsequent advisory board minutes, you'll see that will come off once the purchase is completed. Right.
So yeah, that's from Lee. He says the last advisory board notes our outstanding debt of 120,000.
Correct. So, yeah. So once the county ground purchase has gone through, ultimately, probably the advisory board the next one, you'll see that will disappear, because that's one of the key things that's got to occur as part of the purchase. That back rent's got to be cleared.
I should say I'm keeping my eye on Twitter just in case anything should happen whilst we're doing this, by the way. So if I look away every so often, that's why. Right, let's have a look. Where are we? What was the other part?
Yeah, I might let Neil cover that one if he's okay.
Are there any clauses or plans been submitted to redevelop the ground to the council already? As you mentioned, if the money isn't spent on this project in a certain time frame, the council will claim it back. What do you reckon?
So the easy answer is there's no planning applications have been submitted to date, and nor will they until we take ownership of the stadium through the JV.
Right. Okay. So there's nothing the council could suddenly say, you haven't done this, so we're blocking you on that. Okay. Martin says, football, Swindon fans, let's be honest, have been through the mill a few times. With most things, At STFC, there is normally something that comes back to bite us later down the line. How watertight is this deal? Are there any risks? I think that's, I guess that sums it up for a lot of people, James. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's people. Someone was asking why it took so long earlier. Well, that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long, because ultimately we've needed to make sure that everything is watertight, and and kind of both sets of lawyers have been arguing over the minute detail in the legal terms in order to make sure that everything's kind of covered off. But we're all happy now that we're at a point where that we're happy that there's no way effectively that anything that's kind of happened under previous regimes could occur. And it is watertight, and like we've already mentioned, when Clem does decide to move on at some point as owner, there's nothing that can kind of it's with the club, it's not with him personally. So ultimately we're kind of comfortable with that. I'm sure Neil will probably have some other bits to add to that, but I think we would never enter a deal without the best interests of the fans and making sure that everything was kind of I's were dotted and T's were crossed, which is again one of the reasons why everything's taken so long.
And I think it's fair to say that no legal agreement can ever be absolutely 100% cover all bases, because you can only think of so many different things. But the principles that we've used when we've negotiated the agreement, though, have been based on a hypothetical scenario. In the very unlikely event that Clem was to sell in the future to somebody similar to who owned the club in the past, without naming names, how would the document stand up to that level of kind of conflict? So, and to be fair to Rob and Clem, that's frustrated them at times, because clearly we have a much stronger relationship with the club today than we did maybe 2 years ago. But it's a 250-year deal. This kind of negotiation and the contracts we're entering into today will survive us and generations to come. So it's important that we get it right, and that's why it's taken so long to get them to the point they're at. So I can't provide 100% guarantee, because our lawyers wouldn't give us 100% guarantee, but I'm pretty sure we've got 99.9% of it covered.
Okay, Michael says, where do the trust stand if they're unable to provide any finance for future work? Say something quite crucial came up and there wasn't any money in the pot. What would happen then?
Well, do you want to cover that one, Neil? I mean, I'm easy either way, but
I think the revenue is going to come from typically 3 different places: the supporters groups, the club, and if there's a strong enough business case to support it, then there's nothing stopping us borrowing money. Now, when I say us, I'm not talking about as a supporters group, but you could quite easily see how, hypothetically, a hotel, you've got but you've got a predictable revenue coming through a hotel. You'd be able to borrow money against that. That would be one way that a lot of stadiums, modern stadiums, have been developed over the past few years. So there's many ways that money could be raised, where we'd like to think, though, that as supporters we can play our part. And that could be local companies, local organisations, as well as individuals making a contribution as well.
We definitely want to. We're not going into disagreement with the football club ultimately. We want to be an equal partner, and I think that's really, really important. And as Neil said, there's lots of ways that we can generate income to pay our way as supporters. But I also think that one of the things we have to bear in mind is that when we do go out and launch, with the opportunity for fans to be part of the kind of ownership piece, anything that's donated that's above the 1969 kind of share piece ultimately will go back into the kind of fund, if you like, for ultimately kind of contributing towards that kind of dilapidation and redevelopment. So that's one other mechanism as well that we will be paying our own way ultimately.
Well, the similar question which Daz has put in: if there was significant bill to pay for the ground, for example, the Arkles had significant structural damage and would have to be replaced. It's a wind tunnel, for goodness sake. Would we as trust members become liable? I think I know where he's going with that. I mean, in terms of, there would be presumably insurance built into all this, would there?
Yeah, there's a requirement under the JV agreement for the stadium to be insured. That sits with the club. But if for any reason they want to insure it, then the JV would then insure it on their behalf and claim the money back. So yeah, but that's a good example of some of the challenges of running a football ground. There's a lot of things that can happen with it, and that's why the JV agreement and the lease have been carefully crafted to ensure that the responsibilities for certain things sit in the right place.
Right. Let's. When we own the ground, it will be will the intention be to attract new and big investors? After all, you could do with it pretty much what you want to do within reason. And Steve says, will there be concerts? And even Leah said, can we not deal with the Speedway team to install a track? Now, I'm not sure. You'd have to do a bit of stand moving about to do that. But I think the point is, could it be a multi-facility? We've seen county ground concerts before, and to be honest, they've proved a bit of a disaster, haven't they? Some of them.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but there are possibilities to open it up to other things, aren't there?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, as Neil's already said, we want the ground and the club, between us and the club, we want the ground and its facilities to be used as much as possible by people of Swindon and beyond, ultimately to generate as much income and use as is possible. So I'm not sure Marcus Cassidy would be too keen on having a speedway track around his pitch, but and as we've already said, we'd probably have to move a few stands, but other things are certainly being looked at. Concerts is an interesting one because a lot of the new stadiums that are being built now, like the Tottenham's new ground, ultimately, have got pitches that can be slid in and slid out. So, when ultimately you are holding concerts, you can do that pretty much whenever you like because it's not going to damage the pitch. The problem we've got is that, obviously we play football on it every other Saturday. And, there's only a limited window at the moment with what we've got as to when those kind of concerts could happen. And it would literally be like a window of about 10 days between the end of the season and when Marcus would start reseeding the pitch. So very limited at the moment, and there would need to be we'd need to look at how that could happen. But saying that, it doesn't mean that other parts of the stadium couldn't be used, the ground or the surrounding areas couldn't be used for things. So I think we want to try and maximise where we can every part of the ground to generate as much income as possible.
Yeah, and the the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, of course, the grass is on pallets, so they literally lift the pallets up, and then put them back again. It's quite extraordinary to see them all piled up at the back.
Really, really amazing. Yeah,
yeah, it is. Alan says it would be great to have a memorial wall put up when the ground is renovated. There you go. I'm sure that's a lovely idea and one we would look at. Steve says, massive thanks for all your unpaid efforts. The time you've had to put into this has not gone unnoticed. You speak with great clarity. Such exciting times if all this goes ahead. David says, is there anything reference a training ground going to happen? Is that included in the plans?
No. Training ground has never been something that's been discussed as part of this this kind of joint agreement. But I know the club, having obviously been involved with the advisory board, I know the club are desperate to try and sort something out with the training ground. But I think there's been some investments in the current training ground to try and help with some of the issues that they've had previously, around condition of pitches and facilities and changing rooms and stuff. But I think, at some point that will be certainly something I think that possibly will be looked at, but it's certainly not something part of this kind of piece of work.
Well done to the trust and all involved. You can tell you've all spent time and effort in getting this deal right. Exciting teams for the club and Swindon as a whole. Thank you, says Lee. Mark says the purchase of the club is going to be a win-win for both parties in the trust and Clem. It could be a great gateway to the town. Thanks all involved. Kevin says pretty important that the team stays in the EFL then. Yeah, I mean, a very good point, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. We all want Football League football in the future, don't we? And also, Lepo says, in the future when we're playing Champions League, so have to move the site for 100,000 capacity stadium. What happens upon sale of the site? Now, all right, it might be a flippant point, but I guess the point he's making is if we have to increase the capacity, do we have scope to do that?
So there's a hypothetical scenario, because I think we'd all love that to happen, but there's a hypothetical scenario that says all of a sudden we find an extra 50,000 supporters and we've got to put them somewhere. So there is a scenario where if there was another piece of land that was found and a development of a new stadium was agreed, and it benefited the club, it benefited the supporters, it benefited the local community, then is there a scenario where we as a supporters group could consider moving away from the county ground? I don't think you can rule anything out, Vic, but it would have to be the right solution at the right time at the right place. And I think there's too many hypotheticals in that to be able to kind of give a definite answer.
And we also know that it's been looked at before, don't we? And it's kind of fallen flat quite a number of times, moving away from the county ground. Personally, I think, the more and more of the fans that I speak to, whether it be at games or on social media or whatever, they're really pleased actually that we've not gone down that route. Obviously there's some people that like a new flash stadium and brand new and built and everything else, but I think the majority of people feel like the county ground is is something that we want to invest in and improve in its location and improve the facilities as they are, to maximise where it is and what it is. And I think a lot of fans are keen for us to kind of stay there, certainly from people I've spoken to anyway.
Yeah, we've been to a lot of new stadia, haven't we, in the leagues, and the atmosphere is not great. So, it's not always the atmosphere. It's not always the answer, is it? A brand new stadium. Darren says a great way of raising funds is memorial tiles and plaques, which it is. I mean, a lot of clubs have bricks, don't they, with names of people's loved ones on. You pay, I don't know, 200 quid for that brick, and it's a wonderful way of having that person's name there forever. So that's a great way of remembering people. So how are you about this, both of you? Because, it's a massive undertaking. I mean, you both have full-time jobs. I'm not sure how you managed to do all this, but I mean, how is this working out, Neil, would you say, in terms of the amount of effort and everything that's going into it? Is it worth it?
The answer has to be yes. And it's not just about today, it's about future generations. And I've kind of harped on about that a fair bit. But ever since I was a kid going to the county ground, the stadium hasn't changed that much. The Don Rogers being the biggest thing that's changed since I went as a kid. And since then, it's pretty much stalled. And we can only carry on doing that for so long. So what better time than now? We've got an owner who is showing some genuine interest in trying to move this thing forward, both the club and the county ground. We've got a council that are supporting us. We've agreed a fair deal. Yeah, it's taken a lot of time. And as I said earlier, you've got James and I today. There's a team of around 10 people that have been working on this for a number of years. I'm relatively new to it all. And sure, it's been a lot of work. And I know my wife and son are watching this and they've lost a few hours of my time over the last few months as well. But I think if we can get it over the line, I think we can then build for the future. And I think that's an exciting time for the club and for the supporters.
Yeah, I remember when it was the old wooden grandstand and then they replaced it with the Arkle stand, which to be fair, became a bit of a millstone around the neck of the club when they built the new North stand. So that's something you've got to be careful with, James, isn't it? You've got to be careful you don't overstretch.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, I think, I don't know if it comes across when fans read the minutes of the advisory board, but that's one of Clem's biggest things that he talks about pretty much whenever you speak to him. We can't rush, we can't walk, run before we can walk. Solid foundations, getting all the sort of foundations in place, of which the county ground is obviously a really big part of that. To help us generate more income, have a better ground for all of us that we're all part of and we own, and we can do with what we want rather than being a landlord. Being a tenant. And you've got to get those foundations right. So it's really, really important that you do things kind of incrementally and slowly and gradually, and just keep on building and building and building. Unfortunately, obviously on the pitch, we haven't necessarily done that over the last few years, but let's hope, as an ongoing basis, as well as getting the county ground deal done and, things start kind of occurring and we start improving it, on the pitch as well, we start improving as well, which means, obviously kind of going up the leagues and, and if we can get both those things happening, then I think we'll all be very, very happy.
Yeah, very exciting times ahead for the football club, says Malcolm. A big thank you to all involved. And how about you, James? I mean, you spent eons of time on this. What about yourself? Is this worth it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've not spent specifically as much time on the county ground as certainly as Neil and Steve, our chairman, has. But, as Neil said, there's a team behind the kind of working on this, at the trust, and we all work together really effectively as a team. We're probably the strongest board we've ever had in terms of numbers and skills and everything else. But you do wonder sometimes, where all that time has gone when you see everyone else kind of enjoying their evenings and going out and doing things when you're actually doing stuff for the trust. But actually, when you get to these kind of milestones and you can see light at the end of the tunnel, it's immense. And we'll get there, and it'll just be wonderful. So I just can't wait.
John says, thanks for the update. Good to hear some clarity about what's going to happen. Good work. And Tom says, did I read about a retractable roof for Stratton Bank being looked into?
Don't know.
James?
I've not heard that one personally. But given the owner we've got and his kind of ambitions, who knows? Be nice.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for the 1 minute past 8 tweet from the club.
I was expecting one at 7 o'clock, and I thought it would derail some of our conversations, but it's not happened.
No, it's not happened. Exciting times ahead. Fans just need to be patient. Yes, not good on the pitch, but keep backing, and it'll come. The more turn up, the more it backs what's going on. And just need a big push now to get trust membership increased. Right. How can people join? I mean, obviously with the supporters club, you can join for a £5, simple as that, really. You get all sorts of benefits. In fact, if you've got a Hartlepool on the SAS travel, you get your £5 back. So that's a pretty good deal. In terms of the trust, then, that will reopen when? So people can join?
It's obviously temporarily suspended at the moment, as we said. It's highly likely that that we won't reopen that really in terms of membership until we're ready to kind of after the kind of the end of this month. We haven't decided as yet. I think it depends on how things are looking over the next kind of week to 2 weeks, and in terms of our plans and our launch for fans being able to purchase kind of part of the county ground. If that all looks like it's coming together quite quickly and we can launch maybe in kind of February time, then that would mean that we probably leave the membership as it is at the moment disabled, waiting for that launch. But if it's going to take a bit longer, then we'll look to kind of reactivate it. But I think the key thing really is that if fans are keen to purchase and be part of the kind of society piece and actually own part of that county ground, then we need to launch that as a trust in order to for fans to kind of start being able to purchase that. So just watch our social channels over the next few weeks. We will certainly update fans as soon as we've got information and timescales. I guess the message is, if you haven't voted already on the county ground, please do. If you think you're a member of the trust, a paid member, should I say, and you haven't had an email, therefore haven't been able to vote, please contact membership at trustsdfc.com or engage with us on social media, and we'll look into the situation. I know we've had a few fans contact us, well, quite a few actually, thinking that they were members or not having had an email, and we've had to work through looking at those kind of things. So, but yeah, just get in contact because we really want everyone to vote and get this across the line as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I've seen you answer a lot of those questions. Jimmy says, how many members do the trust have? Can I purchase part of the county ground without being a member of the trust? Neil or James?
So we've got 1,070 paying members. James, just correct me.
Yeah, it's approximately 1,100. Yeah.
And to the second question, that's unlikely. We'll confirm the details in due course. But as the trust the trust will own 50% of the stadium, therefore you'll have to be a member of the trust to benefit in the ownership.
And Sean makes a very good point here, actually, and this is something that trips a lot of us up. Check your junk folder as well, because sometimes things go in there, and they get lost, don't they?
And the other thing as well, as we found, is that if you've got a family, say a couple of kids and kind of husband and wife, and that some of them are using the same email address, so that's caused a few kind of complications as well. But if you yeah, I mean, the message is, if you think you're a member, just get in contact with us, and if you've not had that email.
Fair enough. Okay. Oh, well, I'm still looking and still nothing. So there we are. There seems to be a lot of Arsenal fans tonight. I'm not really sure why that is.
We're all Arsenal fans tonight, aren't we?
Yeah, there's something going on which means that we'd support Arsenal.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why that is. Thank you both very much indeed. There's lots to get through, and my brain's just going around in circles. I don't know what you're doing, but it's an extraordinary amount of work that you're both doing, and the rest of your board as well. So thank you very much indeed for your time. And we should say, if you want more Swindon Town content, of course, at 9 o'clock, Fools Rush In is on. So there's more Swindon Town content tonight. So there's lots of it. So thank you. And is that a message, James, from anybody important that you could tell us about? No.
Not putting you on the spot or anything.
Thanks for that. No, it isn't actually.
No. Okay, fair enough. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, James and Neil. That's been fantastic. As you've seen, people are very appreciative of the work that the Trust do in all this, and it's a lot of it is thankless task, isn't it? Because you can't please everybody. But thank you very much for all the clarity, confirmation and things like that. Just to confirm, it's truststfc.com is the website.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Membership at truststfc.com if any queries.
Brilliant. So have a look on there. I hope that we've actually got through all the questions. I'm sorry, that was why James was a bit delayed coming back on, because I was doing the YouTube ones. So thank you to Mark for actually working through those, and hopefully, Vic, it wasn't too arduous task to keep on top of them. So
no, it's fine. It's absolutely fine, and the more questions we can ask, the better, really, because
exactly.
At the end of the day, if you ask, you should be answered. It's that simple. So, as usual, we will make sure you get the ones, all of them, and then you can pick through them and see. I think we got to most of them. I think it's fair.
Yeah, any that haven't been answered, we'll look at, and we'll add it to our FAQs on our site, on the new website. Yeah,
what I'll do is I'll collate them all and we can go through them, and if there is any, but I don't think there is. I was trying to keep an eye on everything, so there is. But if anybody hasn't had their question answered, please get in touch with us or the Trust, and we can do that for you. Loads of thank yous coming in for you guys, so brilliant. As Vic said, Fools Rush In is on at 9 o'clock tonight. They're talking all things STFC. You guys from the Trust, I know it's not you two, I think it's Neil and somebody else is on with on Wednesday from Bright Lounge.
Yeah.
So again, that's 9 o'clock on Wednesday. And Loath Strangers, when was that one? If I can't remember, was that?
That's tomorrow, I think, isn't it?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's tomorrow. Yeah,
that's tomorrow. So lots of ways that people can sort of get involved, and if there is any questions that they have. Brilliant. So thank you very much.
We should say, of course, we have a game on Saturday. Just
we do, yes. Gosh, it's all got a bit.
We've had 3 Saturdays without football, and it's all been a bit weird. And even the game I was going to go and watch, Tiverton, that was off because of a waterlogged pitch, and everything was off because of a waterlogged pitch. So
it's all moved to the background now. Yes.
And the return of Charlie Austin, of course.
The return of Charlie Austin. So so Saturday we've got that. So don't forget, we've got a socials competition out to win an adult and child ticket for that. So please have a look on that. I was going to say something else and I've totally forgotten now, but never mind, it can't have been important. So, but yeah, so thank you everybody for watching. Anything you want to do, please, anything you want to know, please ask one of the supporters groups, as we can pass on to the Trust or the Trust themselves. Okay, Neil and James, thank you so much again for coming on and being very, very thorough with your explanations. And
you're very welcome.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And we will see you next Monday when it's back to a Monday night panel. So we will be reviewing the Grimsby game and seeing how Mr. Austin did get on. So hopefully, you will catch us then as well. So thank you very much and have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.